Well now. Resuming debate, the honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and debate on this bill today. I think what's been most interesting about the debate on this bill to date has been the opportunity to kind of drill down into an issue of contemporary Canadian political semantics, if you will. There was a time where, when we started to talk about the middle class, I think a lot of people felt that this was just sort of updating the language of standing up for working class people. And that when we talked about the middle class, we were talking about people that were going to work every day and working hard to bring home what they needed to be able to feed their family, to pay for their home, and to be able to engage in some meaningful recreation after work hours as well, Mr. Speaker. And so I think that's where a lot of people felt the language of the campaign put forward by many parties, and especially the governing party, was going when we were talking about the middle class, that meant people who are working hard every day and trying to provide for their families. We see an acknowledgement by the government sometimes that that's not quite what they mean by middle class, because they talk about the middle class and those working hard to join it. But in fact, the way that they're defining the middle class through the tax cuts that they're providing, Mr. Speaker, is to say that, well, first of all, it would only benefit people making over $45,000 a year, which already doesn't include 60% of Canadians going to work every day and trying to provide for their families. But then the greatest benefit, of course, doesn't come at the bottom of that bracket, Mr. Speaker. It comes at the top. And so when we start talking about the people who are really going to see the major benefit of this tax cut, I think it's plain to see, Mr. Speaker, that it's far more than 60% of Canadians that aren't going to be seeing any real substantial benefit from this tax break. So we've been talking about how we define the middle class. I would propose, Mr. Speaker, if we're trying to define it in any sort of absolute way in terms of what that means vis-a-vis the majority of working Canadians, then I would say that the government proposal really does fail to do anything for the middle class, understood as the large majority of Canadians that are going out and earning what is really the kind of median market wage for a lot of the work being done in Canada. The median salary of a Canadian worker is somewhere in the neighborhood of $35,000 a year, Mr. Speaker, not even close to qualifying for any benefit under the new Liberal tax plan. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, if we're going to define it aspirationally, as the Prime Minister sometimes does when he says, it's the middle class and those working hard to join it, and maybe the implication is somehow that's more so the focus, or that we're really meaning to capture all those people under the umbrella of middle class, even though they're living quite a different life than those making $90,000, $100,000, $110,000, $120,000, who are the people really in the middle of the bracket that the government has chosen to target. If we're defining it aspirationally, then, Mr. Speaker, I would say then it's a mistake to say that that's the class of people that need the most help. It's not, and I think often it's implied by the government itself that the intention of the program is to provide help to those who need it most. But if the middle class is going to be defined only aspirationally, then it would be a mistake to say that that's the class of people who need it most. As I say, if you define it absolutely and you're looking at the majority of working Canadians, I would say those are the people that need help. And if anyone needs extra help, Mr. Speaker, or extra resources in order to leverage more out of their work and create an acceptable living standard for their family, it's the people on the lower end of that scale, not the people on the higher end. So I find it a strange focus. I wish the government would be clear about the way in which they're going to go about defining the middle class, if they want to speak directly to the majority of working Canadians, or if they're talking about some aspirational category. But I would say if that is the case, then the help is misplaced. We really want to be helping those who are trying to get into that category, and this tax package really has nothing to do with that, Mr. Speaker. So I find that odd. I think if we want to talk about how we provide real help to those who need it, those working families, and I would say, Mr. Speaker, if the Liberals are going to get away with defining middle class as being that upper end, really as a six-figure category, Mr. Speaker, then we do need to rehabilitate the language of working class in Canada, because the category of people we thought we were talking about when we were talking about the middle class clearly isn't the category we were talking about if you listen to the government, Mr. Speaker. So there's a whole group of people out there, Mr. Speaker, as I say, 60% of them working for under $45,000 a year. Those are the people where I think the efforts of government are best spent, both because I think there's a moral obligation to make sure that people who are putting in that work are getting a fair return for that work and are able to provide for their families. But also there's an economic argument, Mr. Speaker. It's the kind of economic argument that's been appropriated by the government in favor of those making around six figures, which really belongs with that 60% who are making $45,000 or less a year. And that's that the resources that are provided to them and the extra bit of spending money that can be provided to them, whether it's through tax relief, whether it's through a program, frankly, Mr. Speaker, I think that would do a better job, which is a childcare program. It would both relieve the actual dollars that are coming out of the pocket, just the same as taxes are. Childcare is not optional for most working families in Canada. So the money that they spend on childcare is no more an option than the money that goes off their check every week or every 2 weeks or every month in taxes. So providing relief on the cost of childcare is meaningful, putting money back in the pockets of families. The benefit of the strategy is that it also means we could also do a better job of making sure that those services are available where they're needed, because we know that the market has not always been doing that in the most efficient way, and that there's a room for intervention there. So there are many ways to put money back in the pockets of those families who need the most, not the ones where you have one or two earners making $100,000 a year, but the ones who are making what the median salary actually is, Mr. Speaker. So we could do that with a childcare program. We could do it with providing relief on EI, because a lot of those families, even those who might have benefited from these tax cuts, because they were making $80,000, $90,000, $100,000, $110,000, $120,000 somewhere in the country in the trades, Mr. Speaker, are now unable, because the job no longer exists because of the change in commodity prices, to find work, and their families need relief right now. It's why I was quite pleased with our opposition day motion to get the government to move as quickly on EI as they saw fit to move on this tax break, which, as I say again, is really the main benefit of which is going to go to people already making six figures. It's not going to help the people that need it now. So if the government was going to say, what are our priorities? How do we move quickly to help those who need it most? How are we going to put money in the pockets of people that are going to go out and spend that money right away because they have to and they need to? This, Mr. Speaker, wouldn't fit the bill. So I'm shocked that this is what we're debating, and that it took an NDP opposition day motion to get urgent debate on EI reform in this House. We'll be voting on that later today, and I'd be pleased to see colleagues across the way stand in favor of that motion. I think that's much needed. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, because the vote is today, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of being constructive, Mr. Speaker, we also put forward a different tax proposal. So I would say, for me personally, investing in a national childcare strategy is a better way to go, and I think would accomplish a lot of what the Liberal government says they want to accomplish through tax relief. But we said, fine, you guys ran on a platform of tax cuts. It's supposed to help the middle class. Let's play ball. Why don't we give you a proposal that is in spirit the same thing, but would actually do a better job of realizing the objectives that you set out in the campaign, that they set out, Mr. Speaker, in the campaign for tax relief. And so we proposed a reduction on the first bracket that would actually cover that 60% of Canadian earners earning below $45,000 a year, Mr. Speaker. It's why we're looking to move this bill on to the committee stage so that we have the opportunity to put that forth at committee, have it examined, and I hope the members opposite will see that as an opportunity to improve a plan that frankly has misfired, because it's not really helping those who need the help. And I would say it's not helping those that the government in the election campaign implied they were going to be helping with tax relief, Mr. Speaker. So, we're looking to be constructive in this House. We think we've found a way to help the new government help itself, Mr. Speaker. It's a busy time. I know there's a rush to get certain things through, and we hope that our reflections may assist the government in doing a better job of what they said they would do, Mr. Speaker. So if we are voting in favor of this bill for second reading, it's to get to committee and be able to have that debate more fully. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments? The